Here's today's agendas. We'll focus on how to perform what I would call a no-frills integrated cost and schedule risk analysis, followed by a quick demonstration using we'll use Microsoft Project as the source schedule, and we'll import it into RiskyProject and run a quick analysis. Shouldn't take longer than 30 minutes, and as mentioned earlier, we can have any questions that you have about this can be answered after the fact. So first thing I'd like to do is just look at the challenges. Running an integrated cost and schedule risk analysis can present several challenges and drawbacks. Complexity. Integrating cost and schedule data can involve complex modeling, which can be time-consuming and difficult to manage. Data quality. Analysis relies on accurate and detailed data for both cost and schedule. Inaccurate or incomplete data can lead to misleading results. Properly accounting for time-dependent versus time-independent costs is one example. So you can actually it's possible to double count the impact of time on the cost results. As part of this, there's always going to be a little bit of increased effort, and part of this, the reason for this webinar is to show you maybe how you can minimize the effort on that. There's a little bit more going to be developing effort in terms of collecting and validating and maintaining the data across both cost and schedule domains. And probably the biggest one is the stakeholder buy-in. It can be challenging to get your stakeholder approval for the additional time and resources. People tend not to like taking on additional work if they don't know the value of it. So some of this is going to have to be selling the value of doing an integrated cost and schedule risk analysis to help with your meeting your project objectives. So on the other side, what are the benefits? So it gives you a much more, as opposed to independent cost and schedule risk analysis. The integrated cost and schedule line provides a realistic view of risks that impact both cost and schedule. And so that is that time equals money cliche that we use. Alignment. One of the things that it does, it helps you align. It helps to align the estimates between cost and schedule, and that might help overruns and delays. With bringing together cost and schedule analysis, you can get a better idea of where your critical risk areas are that are affecting both cost and schedule and better optimize your resources. It will improve your decision making. You can then go, as we're looking at mitigation activities or scenario analysis, it will balance the cost and schedule trade-offs to improve your decision making. Stakeholder communication. One of the things that is I'll call it that risk, which is a threat and opportunity, is that on the threat side is that you have two domains who often don't communicate enough together. So if you can bring the two cost estimators and your schedulers together at an earlier point in the project and combine their estimates into a holistic view and analysis, that will both improve the communication across your teams and it will give you a better understanding across your team of the problems, risks, threats, and opportunities that your project can take as part of your planning process. And again, and scenario planning that we mentioned earlier. This allows you to analyze both cost and schedule impacts and how mitigation activities and different project plans, scenarios affect both cost and schedule impacts. So requirements. So at its heart, it is very similar. When you're doing an integrated cost and schedule, you are doing a schedule risk analysis. So that means you have to have a high quality schedule, as you would with any SR schedule risk analysis. You can use the diagnostics tool in RiskyProject to identify your issues with the schedule. So that means you're looking at minimizing hard constraints, bad logic, dangling activities, ones that don't have successors or don't have predecessors. Anything that you can do to bring that up, because if you have a lower quality, a schedule that doesn't update properly, it will not, the schedule part of your analysis may or may not be valid. We recommend using, for what we call time-dependent costs, so time is money, to use resources with rates and allocation, so a resource-loaded schedule, as part of the analysis. So, and then we'll use cost estimates for non-resource costs, or what we would call time-independent costs. 3-point estimates for cost and schedule. So we want to account for during in a project, you'll face two types of risk, or if you want to call it uncertainty. You'll have natural variance, which occurs 100, which we model with 3-point estimates and a statistical distribution. And then we also have a project risk register where we'll model risk impacts where we have probability and cost or schedule impacts. So this is an example just with some screenshots about how we might set this up. So in Microsoft Project, these are the views. This can be done in P6, but we have a high quality schedule with all the logic and dates without buffers. So we don't want contingency built into the schedules. Here we have a view of the Gantt chart. It shows all the activities. But if you can see on the side, we can also see that it has durations. We put 3-point durations in here, 3-point estimates for durations, but we also have resources. And we also, with the costs associated with that, and there's, if you can look on the far right, just before the Gantt chart appears, we have a cost and a cost one. And in the cost one, we've imported some fixed costs, ones that are not going to be time independent costs or non-resource costs. And we don't have the project risk register, but we'll look at that a little bit later. So if we look at that behind the scenes, how are we calculating those costs? And this is deterministic. We've got this is the resource sheet in Microsoft Project. And we can see that it has the type of resource it is. We have work and material resources in this particular one. with daily rates, and they are obviously with allocation once they're in this, which is 100%. They have calendars, and those will be used to generate what we call time-dependent costs. In RiskyProject, you'll see this in the resource view, which is just under the project Gantt view in RiskyProject. So when we bring it across, you can check that against your source file to make sure that it's come across correctly. Fixed costs. Now, fixed costs, typically you might find it in an Excel spreadsheet, or the analysis might be done in Excel. We want to bring those across. One of the key things on that is we want to make sure that these are one-time costs that are being done. They're not resource costs. So we want to separate this. So when we're doing integrated cost and schedule, we want to try and separate time-dependent and time-independent costs. Again, if you have them in a source file in Excel, they can be imported from Excel to Microsoft Project or P6. Or if you want, you can enter them manually into RiskyProject. I like to bring all of this data as much as possible. We'll talk about this in a couple slides. I like to keep them all, get it all into one source file, and then use that going forward. The last data set that we require is a risk register. Now, neither Microsoft Project or P6 support risk data that's suitable for the Monte Carlo simulation. So those risks, and we call them risk, we might call them risk drivers or risk events, they must be added as a different data set after you exported the data into RiskyProject from the source files. And because we're using both time-dependent or time-independent, we want to have cost and schedule impacts as needed. So you can import risks. There's an import risk from Excel function in RiskyProject. If they're in Excel, if you have entered the risk into a previous project file in RiskyProject, you have a risk register, you can import those from another project. Finally, you can actually save a risk register, but some of the data for both of these ones are limited in terms of what they do, but they do provide you lists. You can save the risk register in RiskyProject. You can save it as a risk register file and then bring that into an existing file schedule that you want to run some analysis on. So those are the main components that we need to be able to run an integrated cost and schedule risk analysis. Now, tips. Before we do this, we want to store as much data as possible in the source files. What we don't want to do is have two sets of data that both need to be updated and kept current as possible. Generally, they might become unsynchronized, and we do when you import a file into RiskyProject, you open it. A link occurs between the source file, MPP, and the RiskyProject file. So if you go back and do all your updates in Microsoft Project, for example, when you import it back in, RiskyProject will actually check to see if that file exists, that data set exists, and it will update it accordingly. So we don't need to keep we don't really need to keep two sets of books other than the risk register. So If you can keep as much data in there as possible, in the source files as possible, probably lower the amount of work that you need to do. Now, use resource loaded schedules. You can actually, we are now running integrated costs and schedule risk analysis using only resource loaded schedules. So we don't actually have any fixed costs. And one of the ways that it's happening is a little bit more complex, but we're converting any fixed costs into resource costs. But if you just use the resources to drive your costs, and this is what we're doing mostly in this example that I'll show you, it's simpler to implement, and it takes obviously less effort to maintain, and it often gives a good enough result. Especially when you have, let's say, in an area where you don't have a lot of information yet. So maybe at the outset of a project, when you're starting to do some assessment on the level of possible outcomes. Use both risks and uncertainties. If you only use risk events or only uncertainties, 3-point estimates, you will be missing a large part of the actual project variances in your analysis. Research shows, depending on the type of project, that it can be risks and uncertainties. Uncertainties can be up from 40 to up to 70% of the risk that you have in your system. So we want to use both. Use your risk events to link and correlate costs and schedules. So your risk can have, if you have fixed costs in the system, you can use that risk for a schedule impact and a cost impact. And that will provide a little bit better understanding of how much risk or variance in schedule and cost and actual risk represents. Now we do have some, on the next point, we do have some debate on this. We recommending using triangular distributions unless you have data that suggests otherwise. And the reason for that is most people have a fairly good mental model of what a triangular distribution looks like and how to set it up. It's fairly simple to set up. And also when you're looking at in the ranges of, let's say, one standard deviation, the differences that you'll see in the outcomes on the are very, very small. We've done quite a bit of research and analysis on this particular differences that you see, and really it's only when you start to look at the boundaries that you see a huge difference, like a non-trivial difference in the outcomes. So, and typically we're only looking at confidence levels that are at about one standard deviation. What we'll say is that will give you triangular distributions will give, for the most part, the guidance is that will give you the good enough answer to be able to make your decisions. And finally, when you're running using your risk register, I would limit for quantitative risk analysis, which is what we're doing here, limit your risk events to those that are ranked as critical or important in your risk register. If you have 50 risks or 100 risks in your risk register, what you'll find is really almost 90% of those are going to be trivial, and the effort to be able to run the analysis across all of those risks can actually it's just adding added effort that doesn't add very much to your decision making. Doesn't add any value to your decision making. So we look at when we do it, we want to be able to have critical risks or important risks, something that's, if you're using a risk matrix, it's in the red or it might be in the yellow, but anything that's in the green or lower score, and you can figure out what that threshold might be for you. We don't want to, it doesn't make much sense to do a quantitative risk analysis on those. So with that, I'm just going to switch over to I'm going to switch over to our demo, and right here, and we'll quickly just go through this. Now what I've done is I've set this up in Microsoft Project, and you saw a screenshot of that before. I'm just going to pull this out a little bit, and okay, we'll just clean this out. And what we can see here is we have our schedule that has durations, start and finish times, with the resources, and these are our resource costs, and these are our fixed costs. Now, what I'm going to do is set up my field mapping. And what we're going to put is we're going to, if we want to add, and I will just show you how you can add them in RiskyProject. We're going to add our low duration, duration 1, duration 2. We have to map this up. And our base cost, which is for our fixed cost, is going to be in cost 1. And low and high will be cost 2 and 3. Now what we can see right here, this is cost 1, fixed cost. So if we wanted to add them in RiskyProject, I can, if I want to keep them in, and this little, and we can add it based on coefficients. If you've been using RiskyProject before, or the add-in, this is an old sort of standard way to do this. We're going to use, we'll base everything off, calculate the low and the high based off the base, and a triangular gives us a little, and it's going to calculate that as well. Now we're going to do the same for cost. And this is just for on the fixed cost, we might want to add in some uncertainty there as well. And we'll do the same thing, and we've done that as well. So we've added that. So if we wanted to right now, with only 3-point estimates, we could run a statistical, we could run a Monte Carlo just using these 3-point estimates. And here we go. And that's the results of that. Now, but what we do want to do is we want to bring in the risk events, because as I said, as we mentioned earlier, really if you only use uncertainties, you're going to miss the impacts, a lot of the variance that will come from risk events. So to export it into RiskyProject, we're just going to click one of these buttons up here where it says project results or risk. These actually just link us to the desktop version, and it will open up those views and it will export the project data that we have, that we can see right here, into RiskyProject. Now let me just drag this across. So now we have in the project view. Now I'm just going to hide this. So what we've done, and you can see that we've brought the schedule over with the uncertainties that we had mapped. We can see the resources that we had in the system, which are being used to develop or generate the integrated cost, the time-dependent costs. In the cost and income view, we can see that we've actually added the fixed costs. that we have on each item and the 3-point estimates. So right now we have all of the data that we need to run an integrated cost and schedule risk analysis. Now, a couple things that I'm going to do first, once I've set it up in here, and we could set it up in micro if we're running it in the add-in, but I'm going to go to the calculations, and I'm going to set my iterations to 1,000. And I'm just going to put my high results. So this is typically we'll set the high results for cost and schedule will be our confidence level, which is P, and we're going to put it at P80, which is fairly common. We'll go to look at our risks, and I just want to make sure that enable. So we've got that set up, but so the last set of data, sorry, which I did miss, is we don't have any risks in the system. Now we could enter risks if you have a list and you just want to copy and paste them over. You can enter them into RiskyProject. We have lots of tutorials on how to enter risk. For this particular example, because I don't want to take up too much of your time, what I'm going to do, and you can see here, we can import. These are where we get these import risks from Excel if we had that. But I'm going to use this one. It's called risk from another project. Oh, and let's see if there it goes. And I did have a similar set. This allows us, if you have a project with the same structure, if you have updated your project schedule and you brought it over and you have you don't have and you've created a new name for it, but it has the same project task IDs and everything, you can actually import it across. So that's what I've done for brevity's sake. Now we can in our risk register, if you haven't looked at it, one of the couple of views. So we haven't calculated it yet. I mean, you can look at the risk assignments here and how it's been set up within the system. So these are all our risks, and these are our risks. And you can see each one of them has both a schedule impact. Oh, I think, do we have it? 1 to 2 days. So this is all uniform. And a schedule and a cost impact. And so we've done this on every risk. We've included a schedule and a cost impact on those. If we wanted to look at particular risks, we could go into here and we could see how that's been impacted, how those have been assigned on each particular one at a little bit more detail here. And you can see that we have, depending on how we've got the uniform, triangular, that's just for demonstration purposes. So what we've done, we've now got this set up with both, and here we have we have uncertainties for project schedule. We're going to generate time-dependent costs with resources. We have costs, fixed costs. These are one-time costs that are going to be are part of the project. And again, we've added uncertainties. Using the risk register, we've assigned the risk to various activities in the schedule. And these all have a probability. That means they don't happen 100%, between 0 and 100% of the time. And they have impacts on cost and schedule. And those impacts can be what we call relative, which is a percentage of the cost or schedule, or fixed, which just means that it's going to be additive in terms of X amount of days or hours or X amount of dollars. Once we've done that and we've got it set up, we're going to run 1,000 iterations. and we've got our P levels, our confidence levels set up. We can just hit calculate. So that's run 1,000 iterations. Now, for the results, so we can see the typical results that we get out of integrated cost and schedule. So we do have costs. And one of the things you can see here is there is a strong correlation between the cost and schedule results here. You can see that with the peaks, a little bit of the bumps there. And that is because this project is being largely driven by resource costs. So the fixed costs are have a smaller impact or overall costs on this particular schedule. One of the things that we want to, when we're looking at this, is we want to be able to look at the what we call a joint confidence level. Now this is a joint confidence, sometimes called a football chart, a bullseye, and what this does is it plots on here, plots where all the results, so we've run 1,000 iterations, where each one of these meet. So in this iteration, we wanted to drag. You can sort of see at this iteration, it was around 12 million, a little over 12 million, and 500, probably about 580 days. One of the things that you can use as we drag this across, you can start to see the 4 quadrants. It tells us 9.6% of the times at this level will be delayed and over budget. Here we have a 7.21% chance of meeting both costs and schedule. What this does right here, and we're looking at that, I'm going to have to reset that up and run that again. What this does is tells us at the P80 with confidence level that we're going to be setting contingency and schedule margin, that typically we have about a 27% chance right now that we're going to be delayed and over budget at the same time, which means, we can take into that. But this is one of the key outputs that you're going to get from an integrated cost and schedule risk analysis. The other piece that we want to look at is on the risk register. Now, if you go to the risk register, there is a drop-down list here. Now, when it's not set to anything, this tells us which, within the calculation, this score is telling us what the overall score is based on the risk inputs. And that means what it is it's prioritizing or measuring which risk has the most impact on cost and schedule. So accounting for both of those. So if you're looking at which risk you should be applying if you want to mitigate both those impacts, which one of these are the most important? So we know that the gamma ray job has to be repeated, is causing the most impact, has the most possibility to impact the project the most. You can sort it out if you wanted to look at other things. We can look at cost, and that's still the key one. Or if we wanted to look at finish time, and then we can see that sort of on a schedule one. This is one that's going to be the main driver for schedule. Again, we can look at different ways, slice and dice it to figure out which risk is going to have the biggest impact, and how we should, and get some insights about how we should manage the project, where we can focus our efforts on to minimize the impact of these risks. The other ones, but they're very, okay, it looks like I'll look at the cruciality chart, which is, we're just going to go right here. Now what this does is shows sensitivity for duration, sensitivity for cost on a Gantt chart. And I like to use this because here we can see that these, if we're looking for what activities are going to be the main drivers for cost and schedule, uncertainty or variance in our thing, we can see that generally we could, if we focus on the drilling and the risks that are associated with that, and we can see though, that's where we should be focusing our mitigation or planning efforts to minimize the impact that these risks or uncertainties will have on these activities. And if we go back up to the project summary, again, we can start to see this as our integrated project finish times and durations of finish times are made. And these are integrated. And we really see, like I said, what we wanted to see is how the schedule and cost integrate together, and how the impact of schedule drives your costs. One last that we don't have in that we can take a look at, that I just want to bring up, is the impact. We look at the result Gantt. And if we go to the analysis and we go to the probability plots here, we can actually see statistics for variable. And again, this is one more analysis that you get from when you integrate costs and schedule, or you have resource-loaded schedules. You'll get an analysis on the impact of variable costs, time-dependent costs on the system. So again, different views, different analysis, different results will help you to get a much better 360 view of how your risks and uncertainties are going to be impacting your schedule and cost objectives in your project. So that's it for our demo. For reports, reporting and other things, we do have lots of videos and tutorials on how to get the reports on. But that is, in a nutshell, a very, what I would call a no-frills integrated cost and schedule risk analysis. If you have any questions or concerns at this point, please feel free to ask. And otherwise, I'll be closing down the webinar and wishing everyone to have a good day, and we'll sign off. So thank you. It doesn't look like we have any questions on on the webinar today. Thank everyone who's showed up and spent time out of their day to attend. And as always, we will post a recording of the webinar on our site within 48 hours. Thank you.